Claire Fox is here with me in the studio. Claire, very good morning.
It's exciting to be in the studio.
Isn't it nice? Well, you were talking only yesterday in the House of Lords about how you need to get people back to work, you need to get people back into the chamber. You know, it is, as you've described it now, a zombie parliament, not just in the Lords, but in the Commons as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point of being able to hold the government to account is that you have people baying in the Commons and the Lords. Now, let's be honest, I'm not trying to pretend it's ever been perfect and there hasn't been a lot of problems. But when you've actually got a half-empty chamber and people are sort of zooming in, if they are zooming in, presumably half listening with their cameras off when they are doing that, the whole atmosphere is one in which the government feel they can get away with anything, and they are.
Yes, and they're running things through the system, as it were, without really any due care and attention, aren't they? Because effectively they've now brought in mandatory vaccination for a certain section of society, albeit quite a small section of society, but nevertheless a pretty scary thought, isn't it?
Well, I think the thing about the care workers and mandatory vaccination was there was a rumour going round, there was a few hints about it, and I think that even MPs and people in the Lords thought this is going to be an argument or a fight, there'll be a big discussion about it. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was expecting an emergency vote yesterday, a 90-minute debate. I mean, it's so insulting, isn't it? To bring something so important in. And, OK, there's pros and cons. I mean, I'm of the anti-mandatory vaccine variety.
Of course, as am I.
But, all right, let me hear the arguments. Let me see the evidence. Let me see what the discussions are. I mean, it'll have some cursory outing in the Lords probably today or tomorrow, in which we'll also have a kind of rushed nod through rubber stamping exercise. But this treats the public with contempt. It's not about whether it treats MPs or the Lords with contempt. It's the fact that something so serious that says that, remember, brave frontline workers that we're all meant to have treated with utter respect are now going to be used as people who will lose their jobs if they don't take a medical procedure. And at the very least, that requires a lot of discussion, about the morality of it, let alone the efficacy of it.
And also the proof, by the way, of so-called scientific data, which can show you that if you don't get a vaccination and you are working in a care home, that somehow you're going to murder people. I don't think there is proof for that. I don't think they could come up with anything anywhere near that.
The horrors coming out of care homes still remain, that people are not being allowed to spend time with their loved ones. There's regimented rules about you've got 30 minutes, you have to be all PPE'd up. The reason why so many people in care homes are having a terrible time at the moment is because they aren't able to be with the people that love them.
Yes.
And care home workers, to their credit, are as frustrated on behalf of the relatives as anyone else. But if you want to tackle the issue in care homes, you want to actually improve the health of people with dementia in care homes or people who are young with autism
and the
in
amount
care
of
homes.
quality time they can spend at the end of their life with people that they love.
Exactly, and actually have some orientation that makes it worth living, right? And they think that what you do is you force those care home workers, the minority, by the way, who haven't had the vaccination, to have it, even though the elderly people we're talking about are doubly vaccinated themselves.
Yeah.
The whole thing is ludicrous.
We had this debate some weeks ago, and we spoke to a care home owner who many people thought was ridiculous in his assertion that he would only employ people who had been double vaccinated. But if that's the way you want to do it, surely that's fine. Why do you need to pass a law that makes every single care home actually implement a law rather than saying, because if you own a care home, you're perfectly free, I would imagine, even though it might be considered a bit of a breach of human rights, to say that, look, if you want to work here, these are the regulations that you have to follow. But you don't need to make a law about it, do you?
Well, everything now becomes a law, and that's what's really dangerous because choice completely evaporates. Like you say, I mean, I know people who work in care homes and they're actually split down the middle.
Yeah.
Ordinary care workers, some of them say it's disgusting, my colleagues won't have a vaccination, why won't they? And then others say, why should we? And you have that argument. As you say, if you own care homes, you can make a decision. Even councils could make that decision if it was a local authority. But a law makes it a breach of law. That means you're a criminal.
Yes.
Now, by the way, we haven't got enough care home workers. I would want to be going out and encouraging the nation's unemployed people or people to swap jobs
people
and dedicate themselves. Exactly. And say this is a wonderful vocation. You can really make a difference in society. Now you have to say, would you like to make a difference in society? But by the way, can we check your papers on the way in? And if you don't happen to like this medical procedure, we're not interested in you. And I really think that kind of coercion, and it is coercion. And of course, I'm a big fan of the vaccine, but I want people to want it. And I do not think that any medical procedure should be coerced in that way. I mean, it just
of course
can't
not.
be the law. I mean, you are a criminal if you don't have a medical procedure. Let's think about that as a precedent-setting rule.
And also, if it is a precedent-setting rule, what happens next? When are they going to suggest that anyone who works in a hospital has to be double vaccinated?
Well, I think
or anybody who drives a train has to be double vaccinated?
they're going to. What is to stop them?
Yeah.
And actually, the scope of this bill, which is one of the things that some of the MPs did actually raise, when you read the fine print, as far as anyone had time to look at it before they had to vote for it, is quite broad. So it could be that if you're like working in the kitchens in the care home, it's not just care home workers. If you're the guy who's delivering the new boiler or delivering, I mean, who are they going to say you have to be vaccinated? Is anyone who goes in a care home? Are they going to be checking the relatives to make sure? I mean, at what point would that scope not expand and expand? And once you've taken the logical leap of saying the law should be used to force a medical procedure, I don't see why you wouldn't use it elsewhere. I don't like scaremongering. I just think it's such a dangerous precedent.
Well, this is the problem, and lots of things that the government said they would never do, like vaccine passports, we're now still talking about the possibility of them coming in. Helen Whately, who is, of course, the health minister, said to MPs yesterday, the impact assessment is being worked on. And you go, what, so you vote first and then you work out how it's going to affect everybody after?
And that's exactly why...
Isn't that the wrong way round?
Exactly. That's exactly why I think people thought that they were going to come and try and sell this in, but they didn't even bother. As you say, it's like, show you the evidence afterwards. And of course, it's inevitably, it's evidence, not evidence-based policy, it's policy-based evidence, isn't it? It's like sort of, we'll have the policy, now go and find me the evidence.
I know.
This is not... it's not scientific, it's not right. But one of the things about you were saying about the zombie parliament is, the parliament is about to go on recess for a very long holiday, even if no one else is, on the 22nd of July. Everyone goes home till the 5th of September. The government are just absolutely abusively using the system to get things through before September the 5th or 6th, whenever it is, when actually they've then said every MP and every Lord has to come back, right? Then it's like full steam ahead.
So that's going to be a full Parliament.
And they don't want that kind of full Parliament debating this thing, so they're pushing it through.
Right.
That's the scary bit. It's so cynical. It's that explicit.
It is. Well, this is the thing that we've now all gathered, I think, that there's a reason why so many of the sage advisors are behavioural scientists, because that's now the new kind of magic. It's the new, behavioural science is the new black, if you like, where everybody's forced down a particular road and they're all going, oh yeah, and then make them go that way, and then they can go that way over there. I mean, this idea, for example, that they're going to do away with school bubbles and they're going to change the way school classrooms operate in August. And I'm going, well, I've got kids, and even if you haven't got kids, you're pretty clear that the school holidays have already started for most of them, and certainly by the end of July, everyone's on holiday. So why are they saying they're going to change something in August? I mean, it's very cynical.
But these behavioural psychologists are actually incapable, it seems to me, of understanding behaviour, because there's all these unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Because of the terrible tyranny of the school bubble, which is where kids are they're now back at school, but they're literally waiting every day for it to be, it's your turn to go home, and some kids saying, I've been sent home 3 times, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But now what's happening is parents are keeping their kids out of school so they won't be isolated, so they'll be able to go on holiday.
Exactly.
So the geniuses at the nudge unit had forgot to think about the consequences of these things.
They've also forgotten to think about the rather clever kids who have decided that they fancy a few days off, so they'll put a negative test in.
Play the system.
Because the testing system, I couldn't believe that I didn't find this out until relatively recently. All you've got to put down is negative. You've got to literally write the word on a website. You don't have to show a test. You don't. I mean, you have to put the batch number down. You don't actually have to even take the test. You just have to say it was negative.
Yeah.
And then you're negative.
Yeah.
Or positive.
I think
it's
that's
ludicrous.
The whole thing is ludicrous. But I know that you've had her on. But Laura Dodsworth, in her book State of Fear, which actually there's a discussion on it tomorrow night.
It's a great book, that.
I'm really looking forward to also her kind of going through it and updating it, so people should come along to that. But the reason I'm saying it is because she actually details, doesn't she, what was in plain sight but none of us would have the time to research, which is the conversations that the behavioural psychologists have about us. And it makes me think that they just see the public as lab rats. If we do this, they'll react in this way. Now, as I say, they don't really understand common sense, so they often get it wrong.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that they even talk about it, that you don't say, we'll try and persuade the public of something.
Yeah.
It's how can we manipulate people into going along with this?
Because we don't want to be seen to be actually having a view. We just want you to think that you. I mean, they really must think we are idiots, right?
Yeah.
They want us to think that we've made a decision to do something
Yeah.
because they've made us do that.
But
I mean,
of
look at the
course-
mask situation, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
now a complete shambles.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson saying, it's going to be your own responsibility to wear a mask or not wear a mask. You should wear a mask if you're in a crowded place. Next thing we know, Patrick Vallance is at Wimbledon Centre Court in a crowded place not wearing a mask. And I don't care whether he wears a mask or not. That's not my issue. My issue is you can't tell people one thing and then do something else. And so many of them have been doing that.
But you can tell that what's come out in terms of messaging, and this is the kind of nudge unit, is what we must do is associate mask wearing with being selfless,
Yes.
kind people who care about society. And anyone who doesn't wear a mask is obviously a selfish, libertarian person who
Creep.
hates old people, who doesn't care about spreading viruses. And that message, sadly, is having a resonance. And you do meet people who say, well, why can't you just, for the sake of others, wear the mask?
It's not that hard.
It's not that hard.
Well, actually, it is that hard.
Yeah, it's inconvenient, but it's nothing. But I would actually pose it another way. I mean, why is that narrative allowed to go without? I actually think that it's doing a disservice to our fellow citizens to wear masks when it will no longer be necessary.
Cover your face,
to cover your face. And also, it creates an atmosphere of fear. It creates a sense that we are all virus carriers.
Yeah.
It doesn't
And it's
treat them
dangerous
with,
to be out.
It doesn't treat them with any honour if you actually look at your fellow citizen and think the problem with them is that they're a virus vector who might infect you or your granny or whatever. What we should be doing is encouraging people. And, the government has so messed up this alleged Freedom Day by losing their nerve effectively. Instead of saying, right, everybody, now let's really encourage all the people who are a bit hesitant, a bit anxious, being frightened. Let's say to each other, come on, just like we did for the Euros, let's go out and have community come together, attempt to get back to normal as quick as possible. They say, just in case you think that we should go back to normal, we're going to give you the freedom to, but we're going to shame you if you behave in particular ways. That immediately has demoralised people and taken the wind out of the
literally,
sails.
as soon as the final whistle went and the penalty shootout was over, that was the feel-good factor gone.
I know.
And it's not coming back for a while.
Well, actually, when you talk to, listeners, I'm sure you will.
Well, you mean regular ordinary
like
people?
ordinary
Yeah,
people.
real people.
Actually, they really did enjoy. And, I was worried, I thought everyone's going to be so fed up after losing in the football. But actually, when you talk to people, they say, well, it was terrible we lost. But actually, do you know what? We had a great gathering. We had all the family together, all the local community came out, we made videos, we did this. It was, and that feel good factor was a reminder to people of what sociability is really about.
Absolutely.
And I think that people won't forget that.
And a lot of people have had the taste of that, don't want to go back.
Exactly.
And I think that's good. But I think that is definitely the case in London. Outside of London, in other parts of the country, it's not quite the same. But it doesn't take long, Claire, has it, for the sort of virtue signallers to get involved? I mean, after what happened at the football, we then saw this outpouring. I mean, I was more troubled by the yobbery and the thuggery of the people that broke into Wembley and how useless the sort of security was than I was about some of the stuff that happened afterwards, the racist tweets that were sent to the three guys who missed the penalties. Because everybody's now turned it into something else, haven't they? They've gone kind of taken the ball and literally run with it.
So the racism issue is so frustrating because it's very difficult to have a rational conversation about it, isn't it? I mean, I was of the opinion right from the start that I didn't have a big problem with the footballers taking the knee.
Yeah.
I thought it was a bit daft, but I didn't have a problem with it. But I equally didn't have a problem with anyone if they booed it, right? Because I understood it.
Because that's the proper position of a Democrat, isn't it?
And that's what, and somebody who believes in free speech.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, I don't think it's an effective way of fighting racism. But if a gesture suits you,
well, it's pretty
up
clear
to you,
that it
right?
didn't work, isn't it?
No, but the thing that's happened subsequently is this: anybody who booed is a racist.
Yeah.
Anyone who defended anyone who booed has allowed a deluge of racism to swamp the UK, and very quickly we've got this institutionalised racism narrative.
And we've got the
of
Runnymede
whole of
Trust
the
this
UK.
morning now saying
I
that
see
they've
that.
somehow found out, incredibly, by their own hand, that we are a sort of, intrinsically racist country, which I don't believe Britain is.
No, and the by the way, just to say that Don't Divide Us, which is a great anti-racist campaign, have brought out a report saying, refuting
Not
every
true,
single
yes.
thing on the Runnymede, you should get them on. But the thing that you're right about saying is it's almost like an opportunism where people jump on this bandwagon. So, where there are racists, of which there are racists in society, they should be absolutely treated with the contempt that we all feel for them. But the truth is, everybody does feel contempt for them.
Yeah.
The vast majority, 99.9% of people, hate those racists, treat them like they're irrelevant,
Right.
you know, and so on and so forth. And then we're told that despite that, and despite the fact that most ordinary people hate people being judged on the colour of their skin, know that it's a bigotry of the past which they want nothing to do with, they're then still accused of being racist.
Right. I know.
And therefore the word racism has lost its punch and lost its power. I mean, racism was promiscuously used to describe Leave voters. It was promiscuously used most recently to say that anybody who supported those people who booed or just defended them are racist. So what does racism mean? Well, actually, racism means having vile attitudes to people because of the colour of their skin, usually because they're black. And there's a kind of white nativism, which we can all see on social media.
Yeah.
But it's a handful
very
of
small.
absolute horrible...
And I wonder, and I don't know what you think about
types.
this, because obviously it's an issue of freedom of speech in a way. If the people running social media were better at policing that, then perhaps it would all go away.
Well, that's also
Because
true.
that's the only place they can really articulate it.
But it is also the case that if you actually look at some of these really vile tweets, you'll find that their original tweet got liked by 4 people, right? And it's usually the same 4 people.
Yeah.
However, what amplified it was the horrified anti-racist who sent it round to prove that the UK is a racist country.
Yeah.
And so, well, England in particular, England is racist.
Yeah.
And they get thousands of likes.
Yes.
So everyone sees it. So it then starts to look like a bigger problem than it is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, I am ambivalent about
But there
the
are
social
many
media
people, though,
companies.
in the black and ethnic minority community who will say that what you're saying isn't true, because actually John Barnes was on with James Max yesterday saying, you know, banging the drum for the fact that this is not an equal country. And if you're black, you don't have as much opportunity as if you're white. And if you look at the boardrooms, you don't see as many black people as you would otherwise. I'm not sure I'm convinced by his argument, because I think it's a great country with many more opportunities for everybody. And quite a lot of white people don't have the opportunity to get into a boardroom either.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the debate we should be having.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought was great about Tony Sewell's report was it tried to open up a discussion about that, because I do not think that it is all fine if you're black. I mean, I do think that there can be informal discrimination. I do think there are issues.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as saying
No,
that there is a
but there are
systematic racist exclusion of black people from the higher echelons of society. It's just not true.
Whereas you can find plenty of adverts for BBC jobs which actually actively seek black and minority ethnic employees. Now, if you imagine you did that the other way around and said, we only want white people to, we especially would like white people to apply for this.
Yeah, but it's also the case that black and ethnic minority people who disagree that there's systemic racism.
Like Priti Patel.
Priti Patel. I mean, there's a handful that are well known, but one of my fellow MEPs, Christina Jordan, always makes this point that she, you know, there she is, a black woman, right? She stood as a Brexit Party candidate. She got elected as MEP. She gets absolute abuse all the time, showered with it, right? Yeah. She's a black woman. Yeah. What makes it all right to abuse her, to tell her that she's wrong? And people say we've got to listen to the lived experience of people. And I don't, you know, I'm not black. And I think that John Barnes actually has been a credit to raising the bar on this discussion not being as kind of like accusatory as others.
And interestingly, he doesn't care about the taking of the knee. He's like, I don't care one way or the other.
But he tries to open up the debate.
Yeah.
But it should be a debate and a discussion. And you should not be excluded if you're white. But also, the lived experience of one black person is not exactly the same as the lived experience of another black person.
Of course it's not.
Unless we think that they're all indistinguishable and they're a clump who all think the same, which, to be honest, is a racial way of thinking.
But the trouble is, like a lot of things now, we've got this altar, and you can either be slaughtered on it and sacrificed to the great god of wokism, or you can be deified by the great god of wokism. And it's either one or the other. There's nothing in between.
Yeah, but the other thing is that racial thinking, by its very nature, is to think that other people or a group of others are less than human, like animals, right? And some of the debate that we've had in post the match has been a way of othering or treating as though they're less than human football fans. Yeah, and it's an irony that that kind of disdain and contempt for people saying, you know, those type of people. Now they want to say they're all racist, but then they give us evidence, just those few tweets we talked about. When I say few, but I mean even the people who've kind of done the research on this have said, oh, we've found 1,000 tweets that are doing the rounds. There's a lot of millions of people in this country,
know.
by the way.
Right.
Then there's this argument, well, they might all be Russian bots. I mean, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I'm prepared to say that I have met in my time plenty of racists, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they don't exist.
No.
That's still not the same. Those people, and they're often saddos of the worst type.
Of course.
They're not in power. I mean, this idea that there's a systematic attempt to exclude black people is where I disagree. But if there's an argument against that, let's have that discussion. Let's civilly debate it. Let's look at the evidence. But when, for example, the race report brought out by Tony Sewell tried to look at the evidence, tried to discuss it, everybody said, Uncle Tom's. Don't believe
Shout
that
it down.
report. They're the wrong kind of black people saying that. And then you think, well, even if you disagree with the Sewell report, can't we have a proper discussion on it? But no, immediately you demonise the people who disagree with you. But having said that, there was an interesting thing which I do think that our side who wants to have this debate in the open and doesn't think that everyone's a racist and all the rest of it, we also have to try and avoid doing some of the lazy stuff ourselves of just saying, oh, you're anti-woke, and just that, you know, anyone who takes a knee's an idiot. And I mean, in some ways it's a bit like, well, come on. I'm not bothered, really. You know what I mean?
Let's make it a little bit more nuanced.
Do you know what I mean? But also it's a bit irrelevant. We take the name.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they did it so quick, I barely saw them.
I know. Well, that's what they started doing. It was
It's
more
a
like a genuflection.
performative-
It was a genuflection.
A genuflection.
Rather than
Well, I
taking
was
of
going
the
to say
knee.
they can't see me. I'm on radio, but they can now. But whenever I go into or past a Catholic church, because of my upbringing, I do this, right? Sign of the cross,
Sign of the
right?
cross.
Sign of the cross is a kind of, it's drummed into me. Does that mean that if you were to query in great detail my Christian Catholic doctrine views, you'd find that no, it's a thing I do.
Yes.
And if you want to take the knee in that way to just go, I'm anti-racist, fine. But you won't fight racism simply by doing that. And I do not think that those people who object to that, but I don't think that the country is full of people bothering to boo. It's the way it's been weaponised, this whole discussion, that means that we won't fight racism, by the way.
No,
we're
it
not
won't
going to
make
get
any
anywhere.
difference.
It won't make any difference.
It will not, absolutely. Baroness Fox, thank you very much indeed for coming in.